Newsmaker Live broadcast right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Paulion. We'll be together until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we conclude with the clip that peaked. Unfortunately, we did not have a clip that peaked last Wednesday, although I did promote it very often on the broadcast. But today I'm told that we do have one. We'll be concluding with it because it is always good to end those programs on a light note. Because substantively, we focus on, those various serious issues, whether it has to do with, as is the case these days, the crime problem. You have problems with regard to politics. You have issues involving healthcare. This has been a perennial concern for us in St. Lucia over the last 2 years, in particular matters pertaining to the St. Jude Hospital and the OKEU Hospital as well. I'm scheduled to have the Prime Minister as my guest this evening. Unfortunately, he will not be able to be here to bring the curtains down on the 22nd season of Newsmaker Live, and that's because he is currently participating in a sitting of the House of Assembly. Not that you should leave me and go on to some other channel. The fact I've said that, I'm sure that will just, cause some of you to move away from the broadcast. But if you leave to take in a little bit of what's taking place in the House right now, certainly you should return to the program because it is the final one for this year. I remember there was a particular year I ended Newsmaker Live on a note where I introduced my daughter to the nation, and even a few years later we ended on a very entertaining note. We had some musicians, we had Claudia Edward, T.C. Brown, and also we had on the broadcast A.J. Simpson. We have no such form of entertainment tonight, so it's basically two of us will be sharing the stage this evening. I'll be entertaining your calls very early because I imagine that you'd have a lot to say, and just maybe you'd want to give some kudos to some people, and on the other hand, Santa Claus style, you would want to castigate some people. Those who were naughty, do not give them a gift, but those you believe who are worthy of some kind of inducement, some kind of reward, I think you should give them that. So it's a case of take on the role of Santa Claus this evening. Who you think is the individual in St. Lucia has been naughty, or the individuals who have been naughty, and the individuals who have been nice. So I'll be giving that opportunity in just a bit when I open the lines to do so. But before that, we led our DBS News World broadcast this evening with news that the television station is #1, and also it is the go-to station for news and information. That's a result of the latest systematic survey, which was conducted between September and October of this year. And this has been the case over several years now, maybe close to 2 decades. DBS Television has been #1. Most of our programs have also been #1. The personalities have also held a stellar position as far as television and broadcasting on the whole in St. Lucia is concerned. So let's take in this report. In case you missed it at the commencement of the DBS News World broadcast tonight, it is coming from Alex Busquet.
According to the synthetic survey, DBS TV dominates all the major day parts from 6 a.m. to midnight, with the most viewers turning in between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. The survey targeted 500 respondents, all of whom are interviewed personally between September and October this year. Participants were categorized according to age, sex, education, economic activity, and socio-economic classification. The majority of people continued to name DBS as their favorite station. Its popularity, too, is well spread across socioeconomic groups, but the station appears to enjoy the most popularity among the 20 and older group. News continues to be the most watched program on local TV, with 1 in 7 respondents naming the news as their favorite TV program. While television continues to be most popular news source, DBS remains the #1 news station for most viewers. Almost half of the respondents, 49%, named Timothy Polion as their favorite local TV news presenter. The favor for Polion was well spread among socioeconomic groups and the sexes. Rick Wayne's show, Talk, was named as the most popular talk show, and Rick Wayne the most loved talk show host. Managing Director Linda Daher, though not surprised by the survey results, is appreciative to loyal viewers who continue to make the station #1. She says it is significant that DBS remains the nation's television and news leader, even in this digital age when audiences are getting their news on mobile devices and social streams. She says the station has undertaken to also serve its viewers through social media platforms and promises to continue to explore avenues to deliver better, more informative and entertaining programs. For the DBS News World, I am Alex Bousquet.
Thank you very much, Alex, for this report we just filed this evening during the DBS News World. I'm sure that in a moment you'll have your own thoughts. We'd love to hear from you critically as well as to what are the various adjustments and improvements that we can make with regard to our programming, as well as with regard to the news and the content. Obviously, you're existing in an environment right now where you have a crowded media landscape, close to 20 radio stations. You have at least 5 television newscasts. And for a small population, a population of about $170,000, sorry, I'm thinking money, 170,000 people, I'm sure that is a lot. So the fact that DBS has been able to maintain its standards and maintain a lead that seems insurmountable for the others, I'm sure that it's something that we are worthy of praise, and we should be thankful for that. But nonetheless, we cannot rest on our laurels. There's always room for improvement, and we certainly look forward to making those necessary adjustments during the course of 2019, because on our heels would be the other television stations who would be seeking to replace us to be #1. If you're #2 and #3, you're hoping to be at the top. And if you're at the top, you're hoping to remain there, but it can also prove difficult at times to maintain a lead. What we'll do right now is to open the lines to take your calls. We'll give you an opportunity a little later to focus on other issues, for example, the crime situation in St. Lucia. But let us focus a bit on the media landscape and the fact, according to the systematic survey for 2018, that DBS television is #1. Are you giving credence to this? What are your thoughts? Are you in a position to congratulate us? Do you want us to make certain adjustments, certain improvements to the news? Let us hear honestly what you have to say to us. And of course, as I said before, later we'll be focusing on a range of other issues. And one of the dominant areas that we have been grappling with as a nation would be the crime problem in St. Lucia. For example, we've had to date 42 homicides. It's very heart-wrenching that a lot of young people are perishing that way, and also a lot of young people are responsible for the increase in criminal activity that we continue to experience on the island. I'm sure that you would have your own suggestions and your own recommendations as to the way forward. But during this segment, let us focus on DBS television. We're putting the lens on us right now in light of the outcome of that survey. The #1 talk show is Talk, and Rick Wayne has been adjudged most loved talk show host. Now, I never expected that this would happen, because people consider Rick Wayne to be, so controversial, and you do not expect that a man of that ilk, somebody who come across as being sometimes, very forward in his approach and so on, would be loved. I'm not too sure if Rick would would like that label of being described as the most loved talk show host in St. Lucia. But according to the survey, it turns out that most people in St. Lucia, as far as the talk show host is concerned, they consider him to be the most loved, the favorite, and also talk is #1, and also the DBS News World is #1. DBS on the whole is #1. Yours truly, the #1 news presenter in St. Lucia. So you can call right now and let us focus on DBS television if you care to. And I'm sure that not everyone would like us. We're not about fooling ourselves into believing that everyone would like the quality of our programming or would like our various talk shows and even the talk show hosts. So that is why we want to hear from you honestly. Give us your input with regard to DBS television and the quality of its programming. No doubt there will be some challenges for us in the media during the course of the new year, because a new year would come with it various areas that would be confronting, maybe for the very first time, but as a media landscape would have to make the adjustment. We have our first caller line. Good evening to you. This is Newsmaker Live, the final program for this year.
Yes, good evening to you, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you so much.
And your television station as well.
Thank you on behalf of the management and staff of DBS.
Yeah, I'd also like to congratulate Rick. Like you said, the latter part of the results concerning Rick really surprised me. Rick being the most loved talk show host. I too was surprised, when I heard that. And because I thought Rick was probably the most hated individual in this country.
I thought so too.
Yeah, because Rick has gotten some real blows. Some people have been even praying and calling for his demise, you understand, at some point, you understand, and to see that he's weathered that storm, and been #1, he's been #1 for a number of years now. And DBS also, Tim...
Don't you think it's a case of people, they like tough love?
Yeah, there's something people say, you love to hit somebody.
Yeah.
So I guess that is what, people realizing, well, even though Rick is hard-hitting sometimes, in fact, all of what he's saying, is bare truth, and it's something that is very difficult sometimes for us to stomach, but at the end of the day, Tim, we realize, well, boy, what he's saying is true, and if we accept what he's saying, things can change for the better.
Yes.
So I wish the station, continues in that vein, Tim. I continue to wish you all the best, especially for the upcoming season, and for 2019. Hopefully that we can all make it to see 2019. I continue to wish you the best, and
appreciate
I like
that,
the way, something about DBS, I like watching the news, I can recall when you were at Choice, that was the only newscast that I watched in its entirety. I would be watching DBS, perhaps after 7 or so, I would have time to go to Choice and have time watch some PR Daily, watch the 7:30 news, the regional news, and then watch the entire newscast up to 9 o'clock. I never had time to watch, sports cast and so on. But now I find myself watching DBS sports news. You understand? So it means that I'm watching, the entire newscast, every evening on DBS. I think there's something about the way the news is presented, on DBS that differs from some of the other stations. Sometimes when I see the news being presented, especially when you're on Choice, Tim, I was thinking, well, the news being presented on the other stations, and what is being presented on Choice. It's like we're living in two different worlds, two different countries. You understand? And what I can see being presented on DBS, I can take it as news, but I know a lot of people, sometimes, people, journalists are accused of trying to make themselves the news. Instead of presenting the news, they're trying to be the news. So the focus is on the journalist rather than on the news that they're presenting. Tim. So there's a difference between that. So I like to commend you all and hope that you all can continue in that vein. And my favorite talk show is Rick. I hope you can continue in the coming year.
Any area for improvement, you think?
Well, I'm quite satisfied with what I'm seeing thus far, Tim.
Okay.
There's nothing really I can really complain about, and, although they say there's always room for improvement, but things can always be a bit better or go up a notch higher, but I'm pretty much satisfied with what, I'm getting from these, because these are the two television talk shows that I watch on evenings. You understand? It's yours and Rick's. Sometimes I watch Laura's show also. You understand? So I'm really glued to DBS. So all the best, Tim.
Thank you so much. All the best to you and your family as well.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you so much for calling. I failed to make reference to Kenson Casimir as well. He has brought something new, something dynamic to the DBS Sports. We also would like to thank the previous sports caster, Brian. We'd like to thank him because from time to time he has been hosting the DBS Sports, and even before that he made a great contribution to the sportscast as well. So thank you very much, Kenson Casimir. He made the leap. He came on board, and you are watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. What we'll do right now is to take a break, and we'll be coming with a special guest. Stay with us. Welcome back. It does not get better than that. Earlier on, I was saying that the Prime Minister would not be able to make an appearance on Newsmaker Live because he was at this special sitting of Parliament. Well, the Prime Minister has surprised me, and he has made this appearance. Prime Minister, thank you so much for keeping your promise to be on this program tonight, Newsmaker Live.
Great to be here. I think everybody in Parliament was doing their best to keep me away from you, so I don't know what they were trying to tell me.
That's very strange. Mr. Prime Minister, let's focus on an area I was hoping to highlight, solo, in your absence. So it's a good thing that you're here to defend yourself and to speak about that particular troubling issue, and that is crime. And you did promise to address crime while on the hustings in the run-up to the 2016 general election. We are at number 42 in terms of homicide. What is going on under your watch?
Tim, it's a very distressing situation, and unfortunately, there is no one significant pattern that you can point to, other than the fact that the existing structures we have are not working, and to just call a spade a spade. And there are a multitude of different reasons for that. So in terms of the justice system, the inadequacy of our courthouses. Here we are at this late stage trying to fix up Narani Court one more time in order for the judges to be willing to use that facility. The forensic lab got shut down again because of molding and air quality, and we're trying to fix that as we speak. The training of our policemen, I don't have to tell you how we've been struggling with that, but that still needs to get resolved. Recently we had a situation where a person who was charged with attempted murder was on bail, got caught with gun and ammunitions, and was fined and given bail again. So that's a situation we've got to be able to resolve. And then when we look at what's causing the root cause of this, which is going really way back in terms of kids, youth, in terms of what we're going to do to make those changes. So it's collectively all these things together that is really causing what we're seeing here. When you then put external factors on top of that, in terms of the profitability of drugs and arms coming in and out of our country, and you've seen that gangs have gone away from just being territorial in terms of physical territory into territorial in terms of business. We have to be able to grow and expand, and we're making new resources available to start the war, because that's what it is. We have a huge investment that we're making with CCT cameras from Grosley all the way into Castries that will be implemented before the end of this year. The new communication systems, because as I've said, policemen are going around calling each other on a cell phone. So we have a new communication system that will allow all the policemen to be on one communication system. So if they're apprehending somebody in town, as an example, everybody is talking to each other. It's the combination of all those different things. Upgrading the forensic lab once more. We're in the process of breaking ground on a new police headquarters, and included in that police headquarters will be 6 courts, 3 that will be for the criminal courts and 3 that will be for the magistrate courts. So it's going to take time to resolve this issue. We do believe that there are things that we can do to abate the situation. Our emphasis on traffic, more visibility of policemen in hotspots. But here's another big problem, Tim. So we had a situation where we had several robberies that were obviously made extremely public because they had the videotape. And I'm sure, like me, everybody in St. Lucia put themselves in the position of being behind the registry. So that young lady who was at the bakery who was being grabbed, I can't even imagine how terrifying that must have been for her. The situation clearly at what's it called, at Wintec?
I think West Tech.
West Tech. Then you had a situation at the 2 hotels, which obviously captured people's attention in a very visible way. Then you had a killing at in Castries, and unfortunately the information coming to us is that they were either fighting over the gun or cleaning the gun, and the gun went off accidentally and shot one person fatally. You had a situation in Vieux-Fort very quickly afterwards in which 2 people were fighting, and they were cousins. They had been fighting for a long time. How does the police stop that? But the point is that people start connecting dots. You get into this period where it's heightened in everybody's minds, and then it becomes now all connected, and it's not connected. Everything is very, very different to each other. So still the majority of homicides are connected to gangs. And so that's something that we have to do. So even tonight, the major bill that we passed in terms of spending $12 million US in fixing up facilities and starting in 5 communities and getting clubs going in these constituencies is part of that.
But hold that point. There's an anti-gang legislation that would have been passed in Parliament, I think, in 2015. What is that? What are your plans to move forward with regard to this piece of legislation?
Legislation is going to only be as good as it's being implemented. I remember seeing that legislation in terms of which says people can't get together. People change, and people are getting a lot more sophisticated. I think that the other day, after they had a shooting of a young man on Grass Street, he wasn't killed, but I think he was shot in his shoulder. And immediately afterwards, I'm sure I'm not the only person who saw it, that on social media, the threats that were going back and forth on social media. So there's just disregard to the law. It's almost like thumbing your face at the law, that they feel that they can't be apprehended and they're not going to be held accountable. So we've done a much better job this year in terms of the number of homicides and that people have been charged. So 43% of the homicides that took place, we've actually made a charge. So, but the charge is only as good as now the conviction. People must know that crime doesn't pay. And so that number needs to get up closer to 80 or 90%. And then we have to be able to work swiftly without taking away people's personal rights. So I'm not in here in any way saying you have to convict people without the evidence, but we must find a quicker way of convicting people and letting people know that they're going to pay a price for crime. Until we get there, Tim, we're just not going to solve the problem.
In Jamaica, your counterpart, there's a part of the country where you have a state of emergency. It's been there for a while. Do you think we have reached that point in St. Lucia?
No. I mean, it's bad, but it's not to that extent. And again, when you take each of the crimes by itself, and not connect the dots. I mean, what was taking place in Jamaica was really obscene. I mean, I think they were talking about that this year there was 199 murders less in one area than they were the previous year. That's just one section in Jamaica. So I don't think that we've reached to the level of a Jamaica or a Trinidad or even some of our other neighboring islands. But when you break the statistics down, so for instance, the car robbers, which has become a new thing, this is a few people that are continuing to do the same MO.
So why we can't arrest them? Why can't we bring a stop to this problem or curtail it, reduce it at least? It's commonplace. And then there are many instances where people are not even reporting the theft of their vehicles.
I sit at meetings and you get 1,001 different excuses. Right? I genuinely believe that the police force needs to be restructured. There is a recommendation that they themselves are making, and that is under consideration. So security is one of the key areas that we're doing with this Pyramandou lab testing that we're currently doing. I expect a lot to come out of that because it has wide participation by everybody. But it's about making more resources available. I mean, we've upped our game significantly. And I think that I'm not looking for sympathy, but I just want, hopefully, the public to genuinely appreciate all the different things that we're trying to resolve. Healthcare, okay? We're talking about to, at minimum, solve the healthcare problem in this country. You're talking about an additional $50 to $60 million a year. Security, okay? Courthouses, not there. Forensic lab, training of policemen, more policemen, is millions of dollars to resolve that problem. Education, we've spent $10 million this year on fixing up schools. We have to spend another $20 million just to bring them up to a minimum level. Far less the problems that we have at Sir Arthur and generally around education in St. Lucia. So that's millions of dollars we have to fix. The Ministry of Infrastructure has indicated that we immediately need a cash injection of almost over $400 million to fix up the roads. The roads have been neglected for years. Everybody sees what the quality of the roads are. I think that we have done a little better job in terms of potholing, but potholing is not going to solve this problem. Plus, we've not seen any new major roads in St. Lucia. Clearly, everybody who is driving between Castries and Gros-Islet is just gasping. I mean, I came down in the middle of the day today. It was over an hour to go from Rodney Bay to go to Parliament this morning, right? People are going through that level of frustration, so we need a huge investment in new roads. So the question becomes, where are you going to get all of this money? And we were already running a deficit. So we have been able to generate $100 million of new revenue. We think in as painlessly as possible. So we felt that the tax on VAT was not a good tax, okay? And it was affecting small businesses because small businesses who were paying rent were having to pay the VAT on rent, and it was really affecting their cash flow. So by reducing the VAT rate, we've seen now the economy is starting to turn around again. But the point is that it comes at a cost. We lost $15 million the first year. We've almost recovered all the revenue that we have lost. But we have gained in the airport tax, which is predominantly the tourists that have been paying for that. That's $70 million. And the gas tax. And so it's people who've been using the roads and are benefiting it. And it's not something that's coming personally out of people's pockets as directly as some of the other taxes. And I think that I want to thank the public of St. Lucia for their support and their willingness to participate. But I think they're seeing the benefit and will continue to see that benefit, so it's a good investment. But we're lessening the gap of the deficit, but I have to tell you, Tim, we need $5 billion of new investment in this country in order to grow this economy sufficiently that it can generate the revenue that we can start dealing more meaningfully with these problems. Because I'm making the monies available. We're doing what we can do as fast as we possibly can, but we are absolutely restricted by the amount of money that we have.
With regard to crime, let's go back to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, and you made reference to some changes. What are those changes that you hope to implement?
We have a hierarchical system that's Castries-centric. So, you know, all the senior people are based up north. And so there needs to be a disbursement of some of those senior people to be in the South and other areas, to strengthen up the capacity in the South and in the Valley and also on the West Coast. There was a suggestion that the forensic lab should now be, just like you see on TV, that TV show CSI or whatever it's called, is that our forensic lab actually be the people trained to go out and get evidence. That this should not be something that's being done specifically by the police force themselves. So you would really have two teams at the forensic lab, ones that focus on actually analyzing the evidence and another group that are actually going out and collecting the evidence. We have to do a better job in being able to have a database with people's fingerprints and DNA. The discussion we had at the CSME meeting, where we talked about widening the net of people who can have freedom of movement within CARICOM. But that also comes with the recognition that we need to create like an FBI for the CARICOM. We need to beef up that security force, because do not believe for one moment that criminals are recognizing borders and are going to stay within their own borders. They're traversing, yet we don't have a proper regional security force that can deal with cross-border situations. And then getting the strength. We still have difficulties in investigating ourselves. Still have difficulty in terms of accountability. So the structures that we have to bring in have to take those things into consideration so we can become much more effective at what we do.
How is the crime problem affecting your ability to attract foreign direct investment?
Knock on wood, it has not been a huge issue as yet. But I would say to you that the new areas we want to get into, which is the secondary home market, we're seeing good expansion with our headquarters business, meaning getting companies to open up their headquarters here. Security, healthcare, and education are going to be critical for us to be competitive in those areas, because people can choose where they want to go to. You know, solutions don't have a choice, but entities that want to come invest there absolutely have a choice. So first and foremost for my government, it's about resolving it for solutions. That's who we are primarily focused on. And if we can bring it to a high enough standard, then one of the added benefits is that's going to help us now getting more people to want to come and live in St. Lucia. So it hasn't reached that tipping point as yet. And I would say to you, and it's not a good thing, it's unfortunate because everybody else is also having a problem. So crime is on the increase on a global basis. And so on a relative basis, we've stayed pretty much the same. So all around us, and again, I don't ever want to point out to what is happening in other countries. It only tells you a trend. And so you say, am I the odd person out? Am I the only person trending that way? The fact is we're not, but we need to still resolve it.
How frustrated are you that, considering the ease with which some of those crimes have been committed, particularly the robberies, and when you watch the CCTV camera and you see that, you know, people are moving at relative ease, I mean, it must send some kind of shock through you. It's definitely impacting business operations, and I imagine that private sector people and so on, they are very concerned and also frustrated. They want that matter to be seriously tackled.
I'm very frustrated because I know there's a solution. So I know that CCTV cameras of our own, so it means that if you had the robbery at Ideal Bakery as an example, they cover up their face, but when they leave, if there was other cameras, they would have been picked up, okay? But that's only part of it. You still have to be able to do the fingerprinting. So, I mean, even for instance with rape cases, without the benefit of forensic evidence, then it becomes one person's word against another person. So a forensic evidence now kind of seals the deal. So if you see somebody on a tape, and you then see that same person or person wearing the same shirt, but then there is the fingerprinting or the DNA to confirm it, guess what? Convictions become much easier. But the fact is, Tim, we need to make that investment. This is not going to happen by itself. So I think that one, showing people that crime doesn't pay, what do we have to do? And I've said this repeatedly, fix up the ability to capture investigations, work on strengthening the judicial system, work on strengthening the DPP, who's our Office of Prosecutor. He still only has 6 lawyers. We need to bring that up to 10, 12 more lawyers because the number of cases that are pending. So It's a matter of making all of these resources available. And again, I'm challenged sometimes, and I'll call it that, when I say the country's broke, right? And everybody goes, oh, but it's broke, but you're doing all these other different things. It's not only broke, it's broken. That's what we're facing. Many of the institutions absolutely are in need for re-engineering. And that's not happened because we've been running consistent deficit governments, budgets. So when you look at a situation that we have, a person is defined as being poor in our country if they're making 6,000 EC dollars or less a year, which is a pretty horrifying number. That 20% of the population falls into that number. I would suggest to you a person is poor at a much higher level of income. So it means that there would be even more people that are poor in this country. Of that number, almost 50% of them are single mothers with no education with multiple kids. Right? We have 11 social workers. I mean, I went and added 3 more this year, and I want to be able to add even more. But again, it comes back to where is the money going to come from to do these things. So I get where the frustration comes from me, Tim, is when people want to try to portray me and my government as only being business-centric, right? And that we don't seem to want to care about everybody else. There is nothing further from the truth. The reason I'm here is for the people. It's not for the big businesses. But I've recognized that in creating an environment and allowing businesses to succeed also helps us help the people. 1, in terms of getting their own jobs. 2, in making investments in the infrastructure. But 3, growing the economy in which the government now can make a fair tax. And a fair tax is a tax that doesn't put anybody out of business. And that revenue now can be spent to assist in the development of everybody in this country, because we believe that there should be a minimum standard of living of all solutions. My government is not one of these governments that goes out and boasting that there was economic growth. Economic growth is just a trend. Okay, we don't even know really what the GDP number in St. Lucia is. So to fixate yourself on policy, on a number that is an approximation of what it is, and a growth is not even a 100% accurate number in itself. It can only tell you things are moving in a positive direction, or things are moving in a negative direction, or things are really moving in a positive direction, or things are really moving in a negative direction. That's all it can tell you. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about the quality of life that's being able to be delivered. So the frustration for me is to find that balance, is to hopefully work with solutions that they understand that one comes with the other. Okay? You cannot fix the problem without money, because we're in a position now that if we continue to borrow more money in the attempts of fixing these things, and there's no new revenue coming in, you're going to go broke.
19 days before the end of 2018, what is happening with impacts?
Whew. Impacts. You know, that's a really, really tough one. You know, I was hoping that we would have been much further along with impacts than we currently are. And again, I hopefully the public of St. Lucia will sense my own frustration in terms of what I can do. The first thing is that the former government, and I'm going to put the U.S. government in this block as well, whether knowingly or unknowingly or unwillingly, did something that was wrong. So it was okay to ask for an investigation. Absolutely appropriate. But the way the investigation was conducted has really put this country back significantly. So the investigation was done by Jamaican police without being in sync with the DPP. So the DPP's office is the only one that can conduct a criminal investigation. Now, the DPP himself or herself can appoint somebody else to investigate, i.e. like the Jamaicans, but it has to be in consultation and in sync with the DPP's office. The Jamaican policeman did the investigation in isolation of the DPP, prepared a report, and gave it to the Prime Minister. There is no role for the Prime Minister to be involved. And then the Prime Minister blew it out of proportion in that he went on TV and gave parts of the report to the public, at which some people have interpreted as making allegations and incriminating certain people. And certainly when the former police commissioner was set aside It's almost like he was being pinpointed and asked to pay a price without any day in court. I mean, there's no evidence that suggests that the former commissioner did anything wrong. The former DPP, when she finally got the report, her statement was 100% right, that this is hearsay. And it's hearsay until the evidence is, the veracity of the evidence is determined by the DPP. And so what does that mean? The DPP has to commission the DNA reports. The DPP has to commission the forensic reports. The DPP's office has to do all of the interviews and determine for themselves. Why? Because when they go to the court, the DPP is the person who has to testify in front of the judge to say, I know this evidence to be true. So in this particular case, that was not done. Now, my role as Prime Minister is simply to have appointed a DPP and make sure the necessary resources are available for the DPP to do that. So the DPP is currently doing those things, determining the veracity of the information, getting the evidence, because the evidence wasn't even in St. Lucia. So he has to get the evidence tested, get people's testimonials to get it done. Now, on the other hand, you have the U.S. government who is saying that you have to have prosecution. And I can say to you, the U.S. government and I are going back and forth in terms of what's the definition of prosecution. Some people would say it's conviction. Well, I said if it's conviction, they would have said conviction. They have said prosecution. And is in my mind, in the mind of my government, prosecution has begun. Because the DPP has been given the resources, has been given access to as much evidence as he can get, and hopefully that will lead him down to make a decision. But the fact is it's being investigation, which means the prosecution has begun. The frustration on my part is I can do, and my cabinet can do, no more than that. So we're between a rock and a hard place in terms of trying to satisfy the Americans and the Europeans that we're moving in the right direction. The DPP has to maintain his independence and to figure out whether in fact a crime was actually committed, and therefore does he believe he has enough evidence to go. So when I hear a lot of this stuff that's going around, it's a lot of hearsay, and in fact is adding to the frustration of the problem. Meanwhile, you have policemen who are known, who were part of the program of Restore Confidence, and who have it's been alleged that they did something, but yet they have not, there's no evidence, there's no proof, there's no nothing. And so that they're now in the police force in which they're being frustrated. And I totally empathize with their frustration. And there are St. Lucians who probably think that they should be heroes and feel incredibly bad that what is going on. But the fact is that as a Prime Minister, I have to remain absolutely neutral in the situation and continue to exercise the restraint to be involved, because my office cannot be involved. So, that is an added problem within the police in terms of the morale within the police force, and it's a significant number of people that are in very high levels, still within government, who are not giving it their all.
Do you have a period by which you'd want this whole matter to be settled?
Yesterday.
But going forward, next year, at least.
As you know from day one, I've never set a timetable because it's not my timetable to set. The only thing I can hold myself liable for and accountable for is what I'm supposed to do. And I can say to you, and I can look at you straight, and I can look at the camera to all St. Lucians. All the resources that the DPP's office needs, they get. Whatever we can do from our part without interfering with the investigation or influencing the investigation in any way, we do. We continue to lobby the US, we continue to lobby our European partners to be able to find some neutral ground. I mean, as I've said to the US, I believe that the Leahy Law, if you want to think of it that way, has achieved its purpose. So it's about moving forward. We've had a couple of incidences where police officers have killed people, and there's now a new procedure in terms of conducting those investigations. And that hopefully the coroner's inquest has gotten more credibility. And therefore, people feel secure in the decisions that are being made, both locally and also internationally. But I can tell you I'm exasperated, frustrated, but at the same time, I'm not going to throw myself off a cliff, because I know that I'm doing everything that we can. But meanwhile, trying to bring some level of reasonableness among the world, that St. Lucia has done the right thing. Okay, we've made substantial improvements in the police in terms of how they investigate themselves. Lots of effort in terms of training police officers, the ability of bringing independent entities. We've strengthened the DPP's office. And I'm really hoping that all those efforts in combination will resonate on some of the other authorities, and we'll start working collectively together, because we feel at this moment, this is negative now, meaning not being able to get support from the US and training for our policemen, we think puts more people in jeopardy, is actually now doing more harm than it is actually good.
You're watching Newsmaker Live, and my guest is Prime Minister Mr. Alan Shastney. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation and take your calls. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'll converse with the Prime Minister for another 5 minutes, and then we'll take your calls. Prime Minister Mr. Alan Shastney is my guest for the final news program of 2018. Mr. Prime Minister, people are saying that you're just traveling too much. You're staying away from St. Lucia so often that they get the impression that you're visiting Prime Minister. What say you to all the traveling people are talking about?
Look, I know St. Lucia very, very well. Unfortunately, what we need to be able to achieve in many instances is not here. And I also want people to recognize that this is the first time I'm a Prime Minister. So therefore, being able to network with some of the other global leaders, I can't do that here. So there are clearly requirements of me as the Minister of Finance to be able to attend, so annual UN meetings, World Bank meetings. The last World Bank meeting was in Bali. If you're going to go to Bali all the way there, you want to take advantage. So went to Singapore, went to Taiwan, and then passed through Morocco, because we've now been opening up a new OECS mission. So there is a tremendous amount of work that I have to be able to do, and it's to be able to find that balance. But the critical thing here, it's coming back to the conversation we were having before, is earning the resources to be able to grow the economy in order for us to have the money to do the things that we want to do. So as I was saying to you, I would love to have CCTV cameras all over. I would love it that all the policemen can have proper vehicles. I would love it if we could have playing fields all over the place. I would love it if we had amazing social programs. So it's not that we don't know what we need. The fact is we can't afford it. And part of the traveling is meeting with investors. And unfortunately, as a small island, people want to meet with the Prime Minister. And so I can achieve, and that's not taking anything away from my cabinet colleagues. They're amazing. But in the protocol of things, when you go to a meeting, for instance, and there are other heads of state there, if I send a minister, my minister is not going to be given the time to speak. So when we talk about climate change, and then I also have a responsibility as the lead prime minister in CARICOM. So I would say to at least 30% of my trips have been resilience in focus. That's the only money that's on the table. We're classified as a middle income country, so we're not getting any of that level of assistance. So unfortunately, the time goes by very, very quickly. I can say to you, Tim, that anybody who wants to come and travel with me and see how I use my time, I squeeze in as many meetings as I possibly can. I'll arrive back here immediately going to meetings. I'm going 7 days a week from early in the morning. I take very little time off. And I'm extremely driven to succeed in what we're attempting to do. So
Are there health implications for you?
Of course they are. You know, I try
Are you taking that into consideration?
Of course. I mean, my wife is constantly pounding on me. She's great. You know, she's amazing. She's in the gym every day. I'm not as good as she is, but she certainly makes sure that I have my vegetable shake in the morning, tries to make sure I just eat soup at night unless I'm having to go to a dinner, and getting me to walk on the treadmill. So it's to keep up that exercise program. You know, the only sport I play these days is golf. I mean, so I used to play, as you know, a lot of basketball in the gardens. So when I was about 30 years of age, I fell in love with golf. But golf is a sport in which maybe I can play twice in a month. But if I can combine it with a business a meeting and play the golf to be able to get out, and certainly every now and then I get to spend a little time with my son and my daughter, because that's also taken a heavy price. My constituency has been impacted because I ought to be down there substantially more because I'm really a new representative in that constituency. But unfortunately, I do know this, and in terms of what the priorities are. If I do not generate the revenues and the growth in this economy, I can't fix people's problems. Okay? There's no magic wand here that you can talk your way through this. This is about resources. New CCTV cameras, new roads, new everything, new schools, new healthcare centers, new hospitals, everything, all those have one thing in common: money. And there's nobody sitting out there saying, we think that St. Lucia is a wonderful place and we're just going to give you, like a lottery ticket, a bunch of money. So I've got to turn that around. And I think that there are some things that we've achieved this week that shows the efforts of this government. We've been able to successfully negotiate with the Taiwanese $150 million in loans at very concessional rates. We've put in taxes to be able to pay those loans. So it means that we're not going to have any stress on our current revenue to pay for the airport or pay for these new roads. It's coming out of the gas tax, it's coming out of the airport tax. The airport now will be $150 million investment. It's the largest project that any government would have undertaken. During the construction period alone is 1,000 jobs. But more importantly, with the new airport terminal, now I can get the cruise ship terminal. Now you have 2,000 new hotel rooms coming in, and you have the capacity to be able to grow that. Now we're going to start talking about getting some significant growth. Ojo Labs. I mean, I laugh when I listen to the opposition talk about Ojo Labs as to even suggest there was something wrong here. There's nothing. The same NICE program that they were using $1,500 to give a young person a contract for every month, that stayed the same person, and that job was a dead-end job. Could never get a promotion, it never could become permanent. That we've now reduced it to $500. It means we're helping 3 kids, working with private sector companies in order to get these kids their foot into the door, and now it becomes full-time jobs. So we've gone from 38 jobs at Ojo Labs. Today, the number is close to 250, soon to be 270. By the end of next year, 700 kids in the South would have permanent jobs. Huge. Now, because of Ojo being here, companies like Microsoft and Amazon are looking to open up facilities in St. Lucia, similar to what Ojo is doing. We've seen KM Squared, what they're doing, and some of the other call centers. So we have the police, we have the Headquarters Act. 6 companies have opened up. We have 3 more applications, and we believe that we're gonna really see growth in that market, especially now that we've come with the legislation to deal with the OECD and the EU with harmful taxation. The new roads coming in, $350 million in new roads. We're very close to moving fully into OKEU. We're about to start the new hospital wing at St. Jude. We're very close to signing the deal with Carnival. I'm waiting for the letter any day now in terms of determining the location in View Fort. So one part of our job of getting the investment, working in parallel to that, has been the restructuring of government. So the workshops that we're doing right now are about getting more people involved. The current structure that we have is not working. I challenge any solution to tell me where is the efficiency in government, or that they enjoy going down to get documents from government. So we have to become substantially more efficient. So I'm working with that situation as well. Then now you're dealing with a crisis in healthcare. You're dealing with a lot of stress in the security situation. You're dealing with a lot of stress in the education system. I'm here tonight to say to St. Lucians, look at me. I acknowledge the problems. I take on the challenge of solving those problems. I am not flustered. My team is not flustered. We recognized when we came in here, this was not going to be easy. And certainly when you use the word change, it's terrifying to most people. And so it's a process of amending and getting there and negotiations and convincing people that you don't have bad intentions. My only bad intention, my only sin, okay, is the following. To know and not to do is yet not to know. So if you know what you're doing is not working, okay, then stop walking down that path. And let's choose another option. Even if you don't know that option is 100% going to work, but for sure if you continue going down the road, you know 100% it's not going to work. The opportunity cost of not changing course is what ought to drive people to the decision. Or some people will say there has to be a crisis in order to cause change. And maybe what's happened with crime, that we're going to be prepared to make some fundamental changes. But that's what's required. And so my frustration sometimes is how slow we are in accepting those changes. We're going to go down and open up the new police headquarters. There is a cost benefit, okay? The National Trust has argued that the old prison has historical value. Well, the fact is it wasn't on the historical list. When the National Trust made the determination, I'm the lead minister for them. Never called me. Up to today, the National Trust hasn't called me to tell me what their grievances are. They had a board meeting, went straight from the board meeting to a lawyer in order to get an injunction. But guess what? I'm not upset. That's sometimes that's what we call democracy. You have the situation with Sandoz and Landings, two very important investors in our country who have a disagreement. The government, the same process the government used to give the Landings planning approval is the same process that was used to give Sandoz the approval. Landings wants to challenge that process. It's frustrating to me, it's frustrating to a lot of solutions, but that's democracy. That's what we call a rule of law. And would I like to see the project get started quicker? Yes, but I have to allow that process to go through. So I would like to see more getting done, but I recognize the limitations, and I also recognize why those limitations are there, and I respect them. But it doesn't mean I don't continue to push hard, don't continue to persevere, and don't continue to lessen what our ambition is. We still have a very aggressive ambition for this country.
We'll put the telephone number on screen right now. My producer will do so that you can call with your questions and comments for the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alan Chastanet, already 24 minutes before 10 o'clock. So as soon as you call, we'll be able to put you on the air, and the Prime Minister will be entertaining your contribution. We have our first call on line already. Good evening, Newsmaker Live.
Good evening to Mr. Tim and the Prime Minister and your guests.
Hi, good evening to you. Go ahead with your contribution,
Yes,
please.
I just want to make it quick and brief. Mr. Prime Minister, you talk about revenue.
Yes.
There's quite a lot of revenue to gain from the agriculture sector.
Yes.
Right now, the bananas are no more. But right now, you have the cannabis industry and the imported crop industry where you can gain quite a lot of revenue from. So I want to find out how quick are you speeding up the process, especially the process on cannabis.
Thank you.
Can do as well.
Thank you so much.
I'm waiting to hear.
Decriminalization of marijuana.
Yeah, we've had very, very good meetings. I mean,
Thank you so much, caller.
Tonight, St. Vincent actually legalized the use of medicinal marijuana. Antigua has moved very, very quickly. We've been having a significant amount of meetings here in terms of, one, understanding the Canadian legislation. What is it that the Canadian government would require of us in order to be able to get into the export market, right? Because the market's not here, right? The benefit of getting into this industry, as the caller has talked about, is if you have the ability of exporting whatever you're producing. And then the question becomes, how do we transition? Because it's to get the population to understand the difference between hemp and marijuana, to understand the difference between decriminalizing and legalizing. So decriminalizing is simply saying we're not going to arrest kids or people who are having casual use of marijuana. Doesn't mean we're making it legal. The legalization is to say that we're going to allow people to use marijuana products for medicinal purposes. And I think that, CNN has done a great job of the series of shows that they're showing how marijuana has saved a lot of people's lives in moving forward. And I think that that couldn't have come at a better time. Clearly now with Canada opening up the door and legalizing it, there is now a big market. The companies that have been coming down here, and several companies have come, have indicated that there's a shortfall in production of almost 40%. So the question becomes, what role can we play? Obviously, Jamaica has already done its first shipment. So our government is moving very quickly. We're waiting for one last report from the companies in Canada who are getting back to us, and hopefully we can take advantage of this new potential.
And the caller 9, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir. Quick contribution.
Yes, Mr. Prime Minister.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I heard you making a lot of big pronouncements and saying a lot of things that you intend to do. I'm not aware. I'm not sure whether you take it into consideration that that we are already halfway going down. I think by now most of the things you promised, you said that you was going to do, to majority St. Lucian, they're not feeling it. I mean, I can understand the high hopes and everything you're saying about the impacts and everything you speak about, but what I'm seeing now, I'm seeing that you are on your way down in terms of less time than more in government, if before election. So I believe by now, I think you should have, grow the economy, because you, as far as you go, you're trying to grow the economy is not growing yet, and you're already going downwards, because on the 6th of this month, you was halfway. So remember, there's another halfway, and another halfway, you may have 1 year to campaign and everything like that. So I hope that you're taking all that into consideration.
Okay, thanks.
I need your comment on that, sir.
Thank you so much for calling, sir.
Great question. Look, I always indicated to Solutions it will take you 3 years to see. There's no miracle here. But the fact is, I'm very confident about the work that myself and my team have been doing up to this point in terms of laying the foundation. So the last couple of days, approving the monies for the airport, approving the monies for the roads, it took this time to get to that point in terms of negotiations. First of all, we had to negotiate with the IFC in terms of whether the method they was using was the right one. Once you decided that's not the right method, then it was now to put a new scheme in place. And all that was taken into consideration. And I knew that. So physically, the airport starts in January. Physically, the roads start in January. We're seeing new investment coming in terms of new hotels. We have the distillery that's in Roseau that's also going to be expanding. So I'm very confident, and I want to say that to the caller, that by next summer, exactly as I said, that Solutions will physically see the outcome of the work that we've been putting in. The situation with healthcare and moving into OKEU. Why is it we could not move into OKU? There was no money. They told me I couldn't open up the dialysis center there. We did. We've moved a lot of facilities in there already. But we've got to make sure that the last set of moves are ones that can be sustainable over a long period of time. The situation at St. Jude's, we had to do the analysis first.
Hold that point, Mr. PM. We have a call. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening, Mr.
Hi.
Prime Minister. How are you?
Very good, sir.
Okay. I'd like to just bring up a few issues that you mentioned, specifically as it relates to crime and violence.
Producer, address the feedback for me, please. Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to just bring up a few issues that you have highlighted on your show, as it relates to youth crime and violence. Are you aware that our population right now is like 60% of young persons?
What do you define as a young person, sir?
Between the ages of 15 and 35.
Yes.
Right. So I know that a lot is happening. I did a webinar sometime last week as it pertains to youth crime and violence in the Caribbean. And specifically within the OECS countries, it is found that crime and violence cost governments almost 3.5, almost 4% of their GDP growth rate.
Yep.
Now, I know you said that we have very scarce resources to work with, but I am aware that there is a lot of mismanagement, especially in the public service, when it comes to resources, and you have a lot of a lot of the work is being duplicated around the service. So you have education doing one thing, you have equity doing one thing, you have youth development and sports doing one thing, but all of them are expecting the same results. And all of that is money being wasted, and it's not reaching the ground where it's supposed, the grassroots level where it's supposed to reach. I also want to highlight that the CDB have committed funding to the government of in excess of $20 million US dollars. So I'm aware that 3.7 million US goes to the Youth Empowerment Project, and you have another 16.2 million which goes to education and youth development. But these monies are not really translating into what you are saying and what we want to see in the country. And the young people right now are disenfranchised. You have a lot of them committing gun violence. I heard you speak to the state of emergency not being applicable to us or important to us, but I would like you to also recognize that our population compared to that of Jamaica and Trinidad is very small. And just by having the murder rate that we have, you can say that it is almost similar to that of Jamaica and Trinidad.
So therefore, caller, you're saying we should have a state of emergency?
Yeah. I believe that it's not something that should be off the table completely, because a lot of the crimes that are happening, you can actually pinpoint on the map where they are taking place. So I don't think it's something that should entirely be off the map, because at the rate we're going, with all the investments that you are planning to bring in, Mr. PM, these are going to scare our investors away. And a lot of these things are targeted in the ghettos, in the Castries urban areas. And I believe if a lot of emphasis needs to be placed in these areas, and a lot of the activity, even up north, have a rise in crime and violence, in robberies. Young men who are not working, who are just sitting on the block, who are not in any youth organization, who are not doing anything meaningful. Government is not engaging them. They just drop out of school all over the place. Their parents don't know where they are. They are known to police, because, as you know, a lot of the crime that's happening, when the police report comes, they're telling you that most of the young men are known to police. And nothing is happening. Now, I know you're saying that there is no resources, but I believe that whatever little we have, we should be able to work with. We should be able to strengthen these loopholes that we have in the system in order for us to make what we have work so far. I mean, I agree with you going out and look for more and, trying to bring in more. But we need to try to cap that crime wave that is happening. And to be honest with you, I do not think that you should think of the state of emergency for particular communities, particularly, to be off the table. There was something else and a few other issues I wanted to highlight, but I want to allow other persons to come in and give their feedback. I just would want to mention one other one, the restructuring and modernization of the public service which you promised. I think it is important, and I think it is something that you and your government is not tackling, feistily to ensure that it is done, because we need to get rid of some of these loopholes, these red tapes in the system. Some of these people, you must understand, Mr. PM, that our population is young. You 58, 59, it was your birthday recently. In the next few years, you are going to go up the ladder in terms of age, and we, the young persons, will be there. And whatever you leave behind for us, this is what you're going to reap in your old age. And I think particular attention must be placed on the youth of the nation, what is happening with them, what's happening at Boys Training Center. It's a mess. What's happening at the transit homes, what's happening at Uptown Girls. Let me tell you, look at the critical component, which is the social, the educational sector. I've heard you spoke about it before, you've made pronouncements before, and people brush it aside. But it is important, and unless you really take this bull by the horn, we are going to end up in problems. And a lot of the economic activity that you're trying to bring to us, a lot of the trips that you're making and ensuring that we try to network and build these networks, these very same young people, especially those who are disenfranchised by government, in their homes, in their schools, in their communities, they are going to break it. They're going to run after these investors. So it's just a word of caution, and also I want to just encourage you to continue doing what you're doing, but ensure that you place emphasis on the youth of the nation. Because right now, what's happening, if you notice a lot of the killings, a lot of the shootings, is young people that are engaged. They're the ones with the guns. They're the ones involved in the drug trade and the gang activity that's going on. It starts from the school system. It starts from the homes. Parents, some parents are afraid in their very own homes. You know, they are aware of what's happening, but they're afraid they cannot speak. And we need to stamp out that corruption that's happening at the public service level, at the school level, at the institutional level. So I'm going to listen to your feedback, and I hope that I did some justice this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling. Appreciate the contribution.
Hopefully Tim is going to let me answer it, because
yes, go ahead.
I think that the input of the caller is extremely relevant. Okay, I mean, very, very, very relevant. So first of all, we don't have the benefit of working in what we call a critical path, meaning solve this problem and then you can move on to the next problem. We have to work in what's called a parallel. So I can't wait to fix the social problems, fix the civil service before we attract the investors. So you got to start working on the investors, and at the same time work on the education system, work on the security system, all at the same time. I would caution the caller to just cause some restraint on a couple of things. First of all, don't fall into the trap of what everybody says, that there is corruption and that there is gross levels of inefficiency. The inefficiency that he's talking about, where he's absolutely right, is the cost of crime to your economy. When I say opportunity cost lost, right, that's what measures that aspect of it. How do you fix that? So opportunity cost is opportunity of revenue you could have, but it means you've got to make the investment and spend the money in order to be able to get it in the first place. So let's take education, Ministry of Education. $187 million a year, approximately, which is the largest expenditure that we have in any sector in St. Lucia. 85% of that cost is salaries. Okay? So you're dealing with a union, who I love, okay? But you're dealing with a union, which means change is not going to happen very fast. Now, I've said I want to improve the quality of my teachers. So it means I need to be able to pay them more money and to be able to provide more training for them. But it's already 85% of the money to begin with. Then you have schools, physically, that are dilapidated. We spent $10 million. It was like eating cotton candy. It's made an impact, but it's not even enough to really take the education system to the next level. So it means I've got to wait for some of the money to come in order to drive that. Now, am I making money available? I am, in terms of improving education. The 10 million that we've put in, we're looking at a new curriculum that we talked about, the computers. We're going to invest money into a computer that supports the existing curriculum. So can we find a system in which we can download the books, make it part of a learning tool with the teachers, in order to genuinely now make kids more efficient? Because the way of the future is that level of communication. You can carry home your library in your phone. right? This is what the Castries Central Library used to be. By just going online and searching. What I want to do is to teach my kids how to do that more. I agree with the caller in terms of the young people. That's what inspires me every day. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance, Tim, to go down to the knowledge fair that we had and to see the level of innovation that's taking place, whether it's a desalinization plant or my boy Dujon in terms of what he's doing at Sagassum, what people are doing in the communities, even handicapped farmers that are in Ballenbush. I was blown away by the level of innovation they were bringing to the table. That's the inspiration. That's why my government put $20 million into the CDB, into the development bank. We want to put even more money into the development bank to create that opportunity for people to be able to invest in these new technologies. We think the solution is there, but it's about giving them the opportunity. He's 100% right about government. It's about an e-government. But guess what? The first thing that we have to do in order to make e-government work is to digitize the information. So you can imagine me when I came in thinking at minimum the information was digitized. I can take you down to the old Parliament building, the old courthouse. You know what the courthouse is filled with? Not people, not judges, not cases, paper. Paper of which we've spent $12 million on saying that we digitize it, of which we can't use. We have to go back and re-digitize it. Meaning, digitize means copying it that allow it to go into a software system. There's a new technology called blockchain, which is what was the backbone of cryptocurrency. But blockchain now also gives you the ability of, instead of having what we call one CRS system, so meaning that everybody has one database, which is almost impossible, it allows multitude of different databases to be able to connect with each other. And so if you're needing information from multiple sources, it can extract all of that information. We're working on that as he speaks, putting all these things in place. But as I've said, it is going to be impossible to go from where we started to where everybody wants to go. And that's why we said we have to build a new St. Lucia. And I know it's a slogan, but it was a slogan that tells you that we knew from the onset what we were going to face, because many of us had been in government at a different time. So we clearly understood what the problems were going to be and coming up with practical solutions to solve this problem. I want to say to him, I have the greatest amount of confidence in the young people. We want young people to appreciate the greatest asset we have in the Caribbean is intellectual property right. That idea that hasn't been born yet. Okay? So if you take Uber doesn't own a taxi. Airbnb doesn't own a hotel room. But it was a concept that became international. And I use the example of these young kids I met in Estonia. Okay? They invented an electrical scooter. You would love this. So the scooter folds up like a skateboard. So when you go on your bus, you can carry it with you. When you go to work, you can put it in your locker. Right? They can go 35 miles on one charge. So for instance, if I got to the gap at Deriso, and I lived all the way up at Blasha, I can get off the bus there, and I can take my scooter up. They designed it, patented, then went to China, right? Identified a factory, got them to do a contract. The Chinese company is manufacturing the scooter, and then they created an online platform where people now can order it from anywhere in the world. It costs $1,500, right? I got to get my young people to appreciate that we live in a virtual world now. Just because you're living in St. Lucia doesn't prevent you now from doing business on a global basis, and you can be here. And where the caller was 100% correct. How do we create an education system that changes it from when you and I went to school and you were forced to memorize? Okay, you weren't allowed to give the thing. Anytime you thought, they took out the yard rule. I don't know your days if the yard rule still existed. Okay, and they would smack you. And I fought that at school every day. Whereas you now have a system where we need to be able to teach kids how to critically think, to see that every single big business in the world has one thing in common. Started small. So there's no longer any limitations. There's no boundary limitations.
Let's see if you have a final call. Yes. Good evening, Newsmaker Live. Thank you so much for holding on. You're now on the air. Hello? Hi, good evening to you. Final caller.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, Timothy, I'll make it quick because I know I don't have time. Look, Timothy, there are so many issues up in the air, so many issues that the Prime Minister must give this country answers to. That sitting with you or sitting with any other talk show host on a show for, say, 1.5 hours or for 2 hours will just not cut it. The Prime Minister must understand that there are so many questions that the people of this country need to ask him, that he needs to organize town hall meetings with some of his cabinet ministers for at least half a day or a full day if it comes to that, so that he can give the people of this country the answers that they need so they can have some level of confidence in terms of what he's saying. Because the Prime Minister keeps coming to these shows like yours, and he talks at the rate
Okay,
of
but do you have one question for the Prime Minister?
Okay.
Go ahead with one question.
Look, the Prime Minister mentioned earlier that he was going to bring in something like 2,000 hotel rooms. Now, Mr. Prime Minister, how can I have any confidence in what you said to Timothy about these 2,000 hotel rooms that you're bringing in, when in 2008, in your budget contribution, you mentioned that you were going to bring in hundreds, if not thousands, of new hotel rooms to St. Lucia. That never materialized. So how can I now have any confidence in what you just said to Timothy?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Look, very, very simply. In 2008, we were very successful in attracting new investment to St. Lucia. And then all of a sudden, we had a financial crisis. Not caused by St. Lucia. Nobody saw it coming. All of a sudden in September, Bear Stearns went belly up. Lehman Brothers was in trouble. It was the worst financial crisis in our time. So you had 5 projects in St. Lucia that were owned and being financed by a bank, an Icelandic bank. Okay? When the crisis hit, everybody didn't realize that the Icelandic banks were in trouble because all these derivatives were making up their asset base. And the derivatives, the value of those derivatives collapsed overnight, which means that there was no asset base in the bank. So the UK government, now terrified of the loss to the depositors in England, used the Terrorism Act and seized all the assets. So let's go down the line. So you had the Ritz-Carlton project. Didn't happen. And it wasn't because the investors went belly up, it was because the bank went belly up. When the bank went then belly up, the investors went and looked for a new financier. Who was going to finance it? Then you had the Clico situation that was very similar to what was taking place, in which the project in Prala went under. Then Mr. Dennis Nardoni, who was doing the Raffles project, okay, he then got scared of what was taking place with the financial crisis, and then unfortunately, a year later, he dies of cancer. So I can go down and I can tell you each one what's happened. Projects around the world. I'm sitting here and I'm telling you what I'm working on and making to happen. But you have projects that can get literally to the day of the opening and not open the doors. Ritz-Carlton in Turks and Caicos was owned by Lehman Brothers. 95% completed. Okay? Did not open its doors and was just demolished 2 years ago. So you have to keep working. You don't have this thing where you can go to an investor signs on the dotted line, and all of a sudden it's going to happen. Every day there is a new conflict that comes up, and you continue to work on them. So there are 2,000 hotel rooms that we're currently in negotiations or under contract with. So let's take Sandals. Sandals had the groundbreaking. Moving ahead. 395 rooms, $200 million investment. And the landings now ends up challenging the DCA decision. So Sandals has put the project on hold pending the outcome of the case. Rex Properties have demolished the old Rex. We're about to do the project and then now entered into a partnership agreement with the Royalton, which is the Sunwing Group. So now they're presenting a new plan. We're working with the Hyatt in Shock. We're working with Marriott in Point Seraphin. We're working with Fairmont. So the Fairmont project was going really well, and then all of a sudden, the owner said, look, I'm not going to invest $150 million in this small piece of land. I've been now trying to acquire additional pieces of land. Ritz-Carlton, we were doing it with the CIP. The gentleman decided that he didn't want to do it anymore, and we had to buy him back out. We have the Canals project. We had developers. They were supposed to bring the money to the table. We gave them a timeline. It didn't happen. We now found a new group. So I'm just going to say to the general public, this is, if it was easy, everybody would do it. But the fact is, we have 2,000 new rooms online. But guess what they're also looking for? They're looking to see if we're moving. Who is going in their right mind to break ground on investment unless they are absolutely sure we're going to build the airport project? Because that airport cannot take any more business. Even with the project in the south with the cruise ship terminal, they're doing it with the assumption we're moving into a new terminal, and the existing terminal now is going to be a charter terminal. The DSH project, all the information that was given out, erroneous information, that we're going to lease 1,000 acres of land, all kinds of nonsense going on. But guess what? Stayed through it, persevered. Now people can physically see the horse racing track being developed. The next phase is the expansion of the of rooms as well as office space in that area. So I just want to say to the caller, I'm available anytime. I try to meet as many people as I possibly can. I try to make myself as available as I possibly can on your show, on many different shows, because I know that each show has its own audience. I have done town hall meetings, and I will continue to do town hall meetings. I am completely, and my government is completely approachable. I do not believe that we have all the answers in the world, but I can certainly tell you at any point what the assumptions that we have and what the status is. So what we're doing right now with the Paramandu people from Malaysia is developing what we call an implementation unit, a delivery unit based out of my ministry, so that we can follow up not only on private sector investments, but also the public sector ones, what the previous caller was calling about. Are we fixing education? Are we fixing healthcare? Are we delivering to the young people what we have to be able to deliver to them in order that they can see prosperity? So I would like to think that what we're doing in the IT sector, I'd like to think the money that we've put into CDB, I'd like to think the money that we're putting into the training programs to get kids trained so they can go and have hospitality careers. I'd like to think the work that we're currently doing on Sir Arthur Lewis. I mean, Sir Arthur Lewis, classic. The problem is that Sir Arthur Lewis didn't start 2.5 years ago. I've inherited that problem, and I accept it. But the point is, 80% of the buildings that Sir Arthur is currently using, Tim, are inoperable.
Let's take the final comments from you, sir.
First of all, I came here to really to say to All Solutions, I really hope that they have a prosperous new year. I want them to, all of you, to remain safe. I want you to be reassured of your government's commitment to solving the crime problem in this country. And that certainly if the need arises for us to call a state of emergency, we will do whatever is necessary to protect the public of St. Lucia. I also want to say to you that your government has been working very hard, and I am very optimistic about what 2019 are going to bring in. But at the same time, I cannot not look at what's taking place in the world. Unfortunately, the world is very unpredictable in its current status, with what's taking place in the UK, with what's taking place in France, what's taking place in Germany, what's taking place in United States of America, and certainly even closer to us here in Latin America and the rest of the Caribbean. We will continue not to make excuses, continue to always put St. Lucia and St. Lucians first, and in order to be able to make sure that we create as great as an opportunity for all of you as possible. But most importantly, as I said tonight in Parliament, I want to thank the public of St. Lucia for their confidence. I want to encourage people to continue asking questions. And I certainly will work on giving you the confidence that we're taking this country in the right direction, and we can deliver to solutions a new solution. And that's what we're really working for, one in which there is a minimum standard of living. We are not fooling ourselves in any way in saying that the economic growth that we've seen is the solution. We think it's the beginning and we're trending in the right direction. But we do need significant amendments and adjustments in our economy and even how we go about living in order to be able to bring a change in this country. Nobody has to make a quantum leap by themselves. All we're asking for is some adjustments, some amendments. If in fact what we're doing is not working, be receptive to trying something new. And we're committed to being transparent in how and accountable on how we're doing and delivering those things. So again, I want to thank all of you. I particularly want to thank the people in my constituency in Micoud South for their support, their love, their appreciation, and the thousands of you who continue to pray for me and my government. I want you to know that your prayers are very much appreciated, and they are very, I'm so incredibly grateful to you for what you're doing. And last but not least, I want to thank my wife, my children, and my cabinet for their incredible support, the confidence my party has instilled in me. We just came from our convention. So again, I want to thank them for their renewed support for my leadership.
Mr. PM, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live. And to you, thank you so much for watching the broadcast. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked.
Pilih music ini pilih music dari tadi.
And this was not shot in St. Lucia, okay? We extracted from Facebook. Well, that's the broadcast for today and for this year. Watching, thank you so much for your support and the calls and the sponsorship. And once again, we'd like to thank you for making DBS Television #1. Newsmaker Live will be back with the 23rd season of the program on the 6th of February 2019, God willing. My name is Timothy Paulion saying good night and goodbye.